one. Hello, everybody. Welcome to the Welsh Republic podcast, episode 172 today. And I am here with my guest, Radix Volume. How are you doing today, Radix? This is the second time you've been on my show. How are you?
I'm good. How are you? Yeah, it's been quite some time since my first appearance.
Yeah. Wow, I think that was like over 2 years ago now, man. Like such a long time ago. And it's like ever
I
since then, the
yeah.
amount of stuff that's happened politically, it's just been, whoa, crazy.
Oh my goodness, I know. I think when I first came on was like um probably when I first started doing the documentary, or when I first put out the trailer, maybe the first trailer. Um I think that was the last time I was on, right? It had to have been
Yeah,
around
that
that
was
time.
when you were working on the trailer and stuff, you documentary.
Yeah,
Speaking of that, Redix, how's your day been today? And have you been up to anything much?
I have been relaxing.
Yeah, yeah, it's so hot here in New Zealand at the moment. I mean, we're coming into
Really?
our summertime.
Ah.
It's kind of like Hawaii weather, except not as, tropical. I've really missed going to
Ah.
Hawaii, but yeah,
Well,
what about the weather? What's it like there for you guys?
we're going into winter here. It's about probably around in the 30s right now. We got snow for one day, but that melted. But we're probably going to start getting snow again soon as we get closer to January. That's usually our big snow month.
Yeah, I can imagine that, eh? The snow here, it gets hot here. Like, it's quite funny because it's actually come early, the heat, but it usually comes like, later on in January, which is it's kind of really hot outside. So yeah, Christina, Redix, the last time I spoke to you, what have you been up to? And like, how is things going with your documentary? It's like you've had a lot of work into that. You've really worked hard. How's things going with documentary Kidnap and Kill? How's it going there with the work and stuff on that
Well,
and the other
thank you
stuff you've
for
been?
asking. It's it's been quite a project. So, um, as you know, I think you saw we put out a second trailer. So we had put out our first trailer, which we kind of used to fundraise to travel and do the interviews that we needed to do. And then we put out a second trailer after we had done, I visited like 9 different states to interview various people. So we released our second trailer, which I'm super, super proud of, because I think we really took the production quality up several notches, and that trailer is indicative of the fact that we're aiming to have something that is Netflix HBO quality, but with like none of the budget and none of the teams of staff helping. We're 3 people that are working on this, and all 3 of us have other jobs that we do. We all have families and kids, so it's laborious and it's time consuming, and it's like you're working a full-time job, but then on your downtime you're working on this project. And so it's coming along, but back in 2023, we had the final acquittals of the last 3 state guys. So, we had to travel to Michigan to be there for that. That was a huge, huge moment to be there for when those verdicts came in. That was awesome. And, it was good news, obviously. And now, we're going through the appeals process for the guys. So there's still 5 men wrongfully incarcerated. 2 of them are at Florence Supermax, and 3 of them are in state prisons in Michigan. So, right now, Adam and Barry had appealed to the 6th Circuit, who denied their appeal, and Barry has appealed to the United States Supreme Court. So, the way that the Supreme Court works is that they have a limited calendar, right? And they have tons of people who are trying to get the Supreme Court to review their cases. So there's only certain ones that they can hear given their calendar and whatnot. And so the likelihood that the Supreme Court is going to uptake the case is very low. probably about 1% chance. However, that's still a chance it could happen. And because it was such a high profile case, because we're talking about legal precedents being set for certain elements of this case, and just the egregious nature of the misconduct, I think really warrants the Supreme Court to look at the case, to overturn their convictions, to condemn the FBI's actions in the case and the DOJ's. That would be really important and really helpful. But if that doesn't happen, our hope is that the Trump administration pardons Adam and Barry. Now, they are not able to pardon the 3 state guys because they weren't charged federally. They were charged at the state level. So actually, only the governor of Michigan could pardon the state guys. But the Trump administration could pardon Adam and Barry. My hope is that that happens for Christmas this year, that's the Christmas present that we all get, that Adam and Barry get released, get pardoned, get to go home to their families, that Barry gets to go home to his 3 daughters who need their father. That's our hope. And then we have Bill Null, one of the guys who was acquitted in the Whitmer case, is now going to be running for governor of Michigan. So that's awesome.
That sounds really cool. That sounds really awesome.
Yeah.
So Radix, I have spoken to you about your documentary. So I know it's been a while since we last talked. So let's say this: I'm someone new wanting to ask about your documentary. So give us a bit of background on your documentary. So your documentary is called "Kidnap and Kill: An FBI Terror Plot," and it says here in the background the FBI announced, basically, which is called the Whitmer Fednapping Hoax. So give us a bit of details, like what this documentary is about and what the case is and how it came to be, and the important details that people should really know about that you don't hear from the Western media or any of that. Go.
Oh, yeah. Awesome. So for people who are not familiar with the case, basically during 2020, when we had COVID lockdowns, when we had the death of George Floyd, which was May of 2020. After that, we had the Summer of Love, where we had these BLM Antifa riots across the country, where they were burning cities down, they were looting stores, people were getting killed, there was billions of dollars of property damage, businesses were obstructed. People didn't feel safe in their communities, and law enforcement was standing down. They were letting this stuff happen. These people were not being arrested. They weren't being charged. Nothing was being done about it. And so that's sort of the backdrop to when this investigation occurs. So essentially, during this time, starting in really it's October of 2019, the FBI starts investigating Barry Croft. Actually, they opened an intelligence threat assessment on him in April of 2019, but it's October of 2019 that they insert one of the main informants in the case into his orbit, and that is a career criminal and pedophile named Steve Robeson. So the FBI essentially utilized a network of 12 informants, undercover FBI agents, and what the FBI calls OCEs, that's online covert employee. These are online personas that the federal government is using, operating on social media platforms like Facebook, right? Where they're pretending to be somebody that they're not. It's like an undercover online. So they used a network of, informants and actual undercover FBI agents to essentially stitch together a loose affiliated group of people. There was a prepping group called the Wolverine Watchmen that was founded by Joe Morrison and his father-in-law, Pete Musico, in November of 2019. And by March of 2020, so just a few months after the group was founded, the FBI essentially infiltrated the group, turned it into a militia group, and the FBI was conducting tactical training for the militia group. And then during the course of spring through the summer, of 2020, the FBI actually called militia meetings where they brought people together who pretty much like knew each other from Facebook but had never met before in real life. And they put on a series of what are called field training exercises. These are standard militia training that is perfectly legal, that you can actually pay to get that kind of training. Like I could go pay and do close quarter combat training with a firearm. Okay, so there's nothing illegal about field training exercises. But what the government was doing was basically having informants there to try to get these guys to say incriminating things, to throw out and suggest that they do basically crimes. And then a lot of it was just, getting these guys stoned and drunk and then asking them hypothetical questions while recording them and then playing these clips out of context while showing video footage of the guys running around training with firearms at FBI sponsored and paid for training events. And so essentially, they basically just fabricated a crime where nothing existed. And they said that these men that they arrested, 14 men, 6 charged federally, 8 charged at the state level, they claimed were plotting to kidnap Gretchen Whitmer. And as it turns out, not only was that not true, you could say that Whitmer herself was a co-conspirator along with the FBI. And so how can you be a co-conspirator and still be a victim? And what I mean by that is that throughout the course of 2020, beginning in really January through March and April, May, even June, July, the FBI wasn't really able to get these guys to do anything that went from talk into what they call overt acts in furtherance of a conspiracy or a crime. So none of them were doing anything. Yeah. And so the FBI is specifically Special Agent Jason Chambers, who was the lead handling agent on the case that ran the second main informant, Dan Chappell. What he did was he came up with the idea of doing recons on Whitmer's vacation cottage because, having people filming people at a perfectly legal field training exercise, there's no crime there. Okay. They're training with legally owned firearms. They're not doing anything illegal. They may be saying offensive things. They may be talking, but there's nothing there. And so Jason Chambers' idea was, let's have them do a recon of Whitmer's vacation cottage because we can film them doing it. We can get evidence on them, and then we can use that to round these guys up and arrest them. And they obviously wanted to do that before the 2020 election. And so basically in August, the end of August 2020, the FBI says to their informant, we need you to invite as many people as possible to this daytime recon. Now, of course, they're not going to tell the guys that that's what they're going to be doing. However, the FBI had organized this in advance with Gretchen Whitmer. They picked a date and time that was convenient to her. They coordinated it with her security team. They installed poll cams, trail cams, and license plate readers in advance of this thing. So this is how you know it's a setup. This is how you understand this is the FBI's idea. They're choreographing it like a movie that they're going to be filming. And they're in advance of the recon of her vacation cottage. She picks the date and time of the recon. She gives the FBI permission to install the cameras on her property and the trail cam on the road and the license plate readers in advance. So there was at no point was this woman ever in any danger. In fact, she was planning this with the FBI, unbeknownst to the guys who would be arrested. Like, they didn't know this recon was being planned while the FBI was planning it. And so they were unsuccessful in getting these guys to go on that first recon, which was August 29 of 2020, the daytime recon. The informant, Dan Chappell, drove an FBI paid for vehicle to pick up Adam Fox, who they framed as the ringleader, who was he was living in the basement of a vacuum repair shop. He certainly wasn't a man of means. And Eric Molitor, who lived in Cadillac, Michigan, and wasn't even part of the Wolverine Watchmen, wasn't part of the United States Patriot 3%ers. This was a militia group, national militia group, completely fabricated by the FBI. They had their pedophile informant posing as the head of the Wisconsin chapter. And then during the summer of 2020, he announced to everybody that he'd been made national commander. And he told Adam he was going to be the head of the Michigan chapter of this FBI fabricated militia group. And so Adam was inducted by the FBI into this fake militia group. That's how stupid this entire thing is. That's how much the FBI is creating this entire thing and manufacturing it all from whole cloth and literally writing a script. That's what happened. So they get two guys to go on that daytime recon, and the FBI has people in advance that are up in the area. There's a tavern that is up by her vacation cottage. And so when they basically, this is how the recon went. The FBI informant driving an SUV paid for by the FBI picks up Adam. He's in the passenger seat. And then they pick up Eric, who's in the back seat. Eric has no idea where they're going. He was told, hey, we're going to check out a high profile vacation house. And in his mind, he's thinking that they had been tracking BLM rioters who were coming in from out of town, and they were staying at hotels, and they were giving that information to law enforcement because riots were happening. That's what people need to remember. This is in the midst of these riots happening in Michigan. And so Eric thinks, BLM must be learning and changing tactics. They must have figured out that we were tracking them to hotels, these people who were coming in from out of town to riot. And so they must be using Airbnbs. That's what he's thinking when he's told, hey, we're going to go check out a high profile vacation cottage. There was nothing about we're going to surveil Whitmer or we're going to do this to Whitmer, nothing like that. So he gets in the car, and again, the FBI's paid for vehicle. Dan Chappell, their informant, is driving. They go up by her vacation cottage, and they drive by the street, and the informant tells Adam, take your phone out and make sure that you film as we go by. And so it's basically like a cell phone camera video of, you can even see Dan Chappell, the informant's face, as he's driving the vehicle, and Adam is in the passenger seat, like filming on his phone because the FBI told him to. And they had told Eric when they got up there, the informant says to Eric, I don't know the exact address. I just had a general idea. I need you to Google it. And they wanted Eric to do that because they were then going to take the Google search records, and they were going to say, look, he was looking up her address in the car. He knew where they were going. He had intent to do this. Well, no, what happened was you drove him 3 hours from his house up to Elk Rapids, where her vacation cottage is. He's in an SUV with two people he doesn't know that well. They're both armed, and he has no idea if he says no, if something's going to happen to him. He wants to get home to his kids. So he says, okay, sure. And, I'm just thinking myself, this isn't private property. Okay. It's not like the streets closed off. It is actually perfectly legal to drive by her cottage and to film on your camera as you go down the street. I did it myself. for the documentary when I was reenacting the route. And guess what? It's perfectly legal. It's not on private property. There's nothing that says do not enter. It's literally a regular suburban street like you see anywhere. So there's nothing even illegal about that. There is nothing illegal about looking up somebody's address. That is public information. I can go on Redfin, I can go on Zillow, and I can type up property records. I can do property record searches. This is not a crime. But this is the conflation and how these nebulous conspiracy charges can go. It's so easy to take something small or something innocuous or not illegal that people are doing and then string together a narrative to say, well, actually, there's a big conspiracy here. And so we're going to charge them with conspiring to do something. And so basically, the FBI had agents at this tavern up by the lake house in advance, waiting in the booths and in the bushes out front. The informant says, hey, let's stop here at this tavern and grab something to eat. And he's doing this because that's the FBI's plan. They already have agents there outside and inside the tavern. So the guys say, okay, we'll do that. And the informant, hands Adam a piece of paper and a pen and says, draw up a map of where we just went. And he goes, okay, well, here's the FBI agents taking pictures of him drawing the map that they just asked him to draw. Again, this is to try to get evidence that a crime is happening because they had nothing to charge these guys with because nothing was happening that was illegal. So that wasn't enough for Jason Chambers. They didn't rope and trick enough people into going on this ride along. And so they hold another field training exercise, this one in Luther, Michigan, in September of 2020 at Ty Garbin's property. Ty, who would later turn rat, take a plea deal and lie about other men on the stand. And he's now totally free, out of prison. It's just disgusting and it's shameful behavior here, scumbag behavior, cowardice. But anyways, I digress. So at the Luther FTX, that's a weekend of militia training. This was at Ty Garbin's grandfather's property in Luther, Michigan. It's a rural area, very hard to even find from the road. It's very it's a very isolated area. So that, you know, you're there for a weekend, you believe you're just doing regular militia training like you've done before. Some people got hotel rooms. They had like a trailer there, and people sometimes set up tents and just camp out for a weekend of training. So that's what they did during Luther. And on the night of September 12, I believe it was, the FBI informants and undercover agents approach more of the guys that they weren't able to get to go on the daytime recon. And they say, hey, you know, we're going to want to go on a ride. We're going to go for a ride. Barry was told they were going to go do land navigation training. So he says, okay, you know, sure. The FBI has 3 of these vehicles drive once again to her cottage and just drive down the street while the FBI furnished DeWalt radio walkie-talkies to the guys in the other vehicles. And they're like, oh, see if you can see us on the other side of the lake. We're going to flash a flashlight. And the guys just have no idea what's going on, but they're like, okay. Like they think that this is some type of training exercise, or like they're not really sure what's going on. But in any case, like this, again, it's not illegal to drive up by that road. It's not on private property, and it's certainly not illegal to flash a flashlight across a lake to see if somebody else can see it. I mean, this is just asinine. But that was the so-called nighttime recon. Like, okay, if this was an actual team of hardened criminals who were really plotting to kidnap Whitmer, wouldn't they have like actually gone up to the actual property itself? Wouldn't have they gone into the backyard to see where they could make their amphibious assault, as the FBI claimed that they were going to ride up on a boat, somehow kill her security detail, get her out of the out of the cottage house. Like, and this is meanwhile in a suburban, like there's neighbors on either side across the street. At what, how was this going to happen? And
I
nobody would
know.
see or hear a team of like 8 guys shooting all these people. Like, there's just no conception of how this would even work. And what you'll see in the documentary is that if there was no way that they could have even have done the amphibious assault, like to come up on the back of the property in a boat and like somehow kidnap her, get her out into the boat, and then what? Because that lake does not empty into Lake Michigan. The government said they were going to take her across Lake Michigan all the way to Wisconsin, where they were going to put on a citizen's trial and execute her. And like, none of that was going to happen. But how is a recon you just driving down a street or like flashing a flashlight to see if somebody else could see it? I could go to a lake and do that right now, and it's not illegal. I could even purchase night vision goggles to see, you know, like, none of this shit is illegal. And none of it is a plot or a plan or a criminal agreement or conspiracy. It's people being driven around by the FBI, being given toys like little radios by the feds, and they think that they're doing some kind of like training, you know, exercise. Or like, they don't even know what the fuck is going on. Half of these guys were sleeping during the FBI driving them up there. They didn't know where they were going in advance. It's just so dumb. So that's basically the crux of it. This is essentially what the feds claim the crime was, is that they wanted to kidnap her. And the evidence for this is that the FBI staged 2 fake recons of her vacation cottage, and the FBI put on a series of militia meetings and training exercises throughout 2020 and just filmed people and recorded them talking shit while they were there and while they were being furnished with alcohol and marijuana. So
You know, Radix,
that's in a nutshell what happened. These men were arrested. 14 of them were arrested, 6 charged federally, 8 at the state level, 4 separate trials. And so I, as just an independent journalist, when the news of the arrests occurred, I knew that it was going to be a lie because the FBI was involved. And then, of course, it, you know, turned out that I was right. And so the documentary I've been working on for several years now, just kind of interviewing these guys, interviewing witnesses, people who were at a meeting or a field training exercise, getting their stories, comparing their stories to other people's stories who didn't know. I talked to this person, you know, and you get an idea of what actually happened, which is very different than the official narrative. And the mainstream media never acknowledged the overwhelming evidence of the FBI staging the entire thing. You know, they all still maintain the lie. They continue to slander these men, even though 5 of them have been acquitted by 2 separate juries. They just pretend like that didn't happen. And, you know, they just continue to pretend that there was a plot when, in fact, there was never a plot, except on the part of the FBI, of course.
That is an absolutely brilliant analysis. And you know, Radix, hearing about this story and the FBI and how much of just a clown show the organization is, especially the CIA, and how the Federal Reserve elitists and like how the Zionist oligarch who controls America, basically how FBI is controlled by Mossad, and how Mossad has that slogan, basically war through deception, and how you mentioned here in the about page, I love it where it says headlines to expose the dark underbelly of the FBI counterterrorism unit in the post 9/11 America. It's ridiculous. If the FBI shouldn't, it's just ridiculous. The CIA is ridiculous. It's a banana show. Like, this is what you can expect in the Banana Republic. That's a corporation for these elitists. And I really, what happened to those men that you've mentioned is just criminal, so unconstitutional. And I really believe that your friend Bill, is Bill, right? Bill,
Yep.
who's running for the governor, I think should have every right to say, look, the Supreme Court should have a look into this. This is disgusting what's happened. It's espionage. Like, for real, you guys should be allowed to go on that court. It's just ridiculous. Honestly, America is just I'm not saying, you know, Americans like you are bad. Americans like you are very smart, but I'm just saying America's just, you know, just such a banana republic.
No, it
It is.
is, and I think that you know, one of the interesting aspects to this is that when I talk to foreign audiences, you know, people in Europe, you know, I was interviewed by a German publication for the documentary, and it's so fascinating to me to kind of see the difference in perspective. And what I mean by that is, it seems like Europeans are more aware of the fact that like they're in a police state, basically. Like they're more skeptical of like the legal system and whatnot. Whereas Americans tend to believe, because they've been told that they have complete freedom and freedom of speech and freedom of association, that there's a naivete to the average American who's never actually experienced the criminal justice system, that they have a CSI, and this is actually a thing, by the way. It's called the CSI effect, where CSI was a crime scene show, you know, where it's like these TV shows like Law and Order, CSI, that give people this idea, number one, that like law enforcement are always the good guys and the people that they're going after are always the bad
Yeah,
guys, and
no.
there's no such thing as a
Hey,
corrupt cop or a corrupt prosecutor.
Reddit, Reddit, as they say from Operation Mockingbird Media, which is another thing the elitists have used to control, you know, America and a lot of the West. As you were
Oh
saying, keep
yeah.
going.
What's that?
As you were saying, yeah, you keep going with what you were saying there. But
Oh
the,
yeah.
you know, yeah,
Yeah, no,
yeah,
absolutely. So the average American just has this false conception that the police are never corrupt, prosecutors are never dirty and corrupt and just looking to make a career for themselves, and that they will absolutely destroy the lives of innocent people to do so. Like they have, because they've watched Law and Order, this idea that like they're all just the good guys, and that the cops wouldn't investigate you unless you'd done something wrong, and you know the FBI wouldn't target you unless you were doing something, and it's just such idiocy. But this is what they believe, and then because of shows like CSI, they have a false understanding of like how forensics work and forensic evidence, and how that evidence can be planted and can
I
be
know.
manipulated. They don't It's like they have this idea in their minds that there's this perfect chain of custody and this perfect science that is always right, never gets it wrong. DNA evidence, you know, and it's like, yeah, well, um if you haven't noticed, like you're walking DNA. So you have skin flakes that come off, you have fluids like saliva, you have hair that can come out. That's DNA evidence. It's not
I know.
hard to plant this shit, okay? Um, and so, you know, you have this, I think with Americans, they get their understanding of things from the television. Americans
Yeah,
don't read. There's an anti-intellectualism here, which I myself do subscribe to a degree, because I don't trust experts and authority figures. But I'm also somebody who does read. I don't think that being intelligent in and of itself is a bad thing, but the average American does not read books, couldn't read a book to save their, you know, heaven forbid they have to read more than a chapter at a time. If they read at all, most of the information they get from social media, and most of their understanding of history, of how the government works, of how federal agencies and law enforcement works, comes from television. It comes from popular culture media products. And these products are designed to present the agencies in a certain way. Like if you've ever watched a crime show about an FBI agent, at no point in that show are they actually going to show the corrupt political nature of how these bureaucracies work, how
I know.
self-serving these people are, how corrupt and dirty they are. It's always that it's just a girl boss, you know, working for the FBI, and she wants to get these terrorists and bad guys, and it's nonsense. And yet, this is what the average American thinks about. This is their understanding of how this works. That's what it comes from.
I know. It's Redx. It's like I know that you and me have different opinions to Russia and China, but that's fine. It's like how they lie about Russia and China. You know how Russia, they'll say that China is a dictatorship, but yet they don't know about it when China is actually a country which is socialist democracy with Chinese characteristics. They have the largest local elections in the world. They deal with corruption in a really mature way, which is great because their country is not controlled by Zionist oligarchs. It's the same as Russia. Russia is not controlled by Zionist oligarchs. They're a federation democracy with a republican form of government, much secure elections, and they have a much trusted agency that's far more better, far more, less corrupt. And it doesn't, their agencies and government don't do what America does. It's the same thing of Iran. Iran's government doesn't do that to people, like Belarus, even North Korea. It's just, I know you may be surprised I'm saying North Korea, but that's fine. Everyone has different beliefs. But it's just like, what we've been told about these countries is just there. Not to mention Venezuela. Oh, the oil. Oh, we're going. Oh, actually, no. We're not going after the oil. We're actually going after the terrorists. All of that stuff. And oh, it's ridiculous. But anyway, speaking of that, Redx, when you were having your interview with Bill today, what would you say was your favorite point of the interview with Bill today, since he's running for governor of Michigan?
Well, my favorite part of it is just that if he wins, if we get him elected, he can pardon the other 3 guys who need to be pardoned. Who Whitmer certainly isn't going to pardon as the governor of Michigan, and the fake victim in the case. So I think that would be awesome. I honestly think that that's probably going to be their best bet, because Whitmer herself appointed many of the justices that are on the Michigan Supreme Court. So I don't expect them to give these guys a fair shake at all. And think about this, the so-called victim in the case is the governor of your state. It's your boss, basically, and she appointed you to the bench. So why would any of these Michigan Supreme Court justices do anything that could be perceived as being against her? And that's the problem with the high profile nature of this case, because in a way, if it hadn't been so high profile, and Whitmer hadn't have been the fake victim of the case, there's no way that any of these men would have been convicted. But because it was a case that received national attention, many of the people involved in prosecuting the case, and of course in the overseeing the trials, they're not going to, it just wasn't going to be, it was never going to be fair. I would argue that they were too biased and too compromised and too conflicted to even be a proper venue for this case. And it's the intimidation factor, right? Dana Nessel's the attorney general of the state. And one of the things that we found out, actually, Judge Wilson, who oversaw the Jackson County trial for Joe, Pete, and Paul, while that trial was going on, he was being investigated. There were allegations against him of sexual harassment and misconduct, and there were allegations going back years that he was an alcoholic, that he was being caught basically drinking on the bench so badly that you could smell it on him. Other people in the court were reporting this. There was a female judge that he tried to proposition for sex, and so this is at the time while he's overseeing this high profile case. And so it just makes you think, well, wait a second. Did the attorney general's office threaten him? That's the question, right? There's a question of impropriety, of even an appearance of impropriety in the legal profession is supposed to be, you don't even want the appearance of impropriety or a potential conflict of interest. And so he is now under investigation officially, but they knew he was under investigation at the time. At least people had been told that. Family members of the Whitmer guys, there was just no public acknowledgement of it. It hadn't been publicly reported until, of course, after they're convicted. And now he's under investigation publicly. And so these are some of the things that are very very sad and very concerning in this case. And that's why, it's very exciting that Bill is running for governor, because he is somebody who has gone up against not just the state of Michigan, the Attorney General of Michigan, Dana Nassel, and her team of demons. But also he's gone up against the federal government, against the FBI, and won in court. He beat them. So that's a fighter. Okay. And that's somebody who's been through something that most people have never had to experience, thank God. But he's somebody who has experienced what it's like having the federal government come after you. And so that's somebody who you want to have representing you, because that's a man who's going to go into, if he is elected governor of Michigan, he's going to go into his position, and he's going to immediately start looking for, how do we make things more transparent? How do we have better oversight of law enforcement? How do we, reform the government? And how do we find these bad actors and, people who are willing to frame people and get rid of them? And he's somebody who's a working class guy. And that's a lot of Michiganders, okay? And their costs keep going up, their taxes keep going up, property taxes going up, utilities going up, while at the same time, wages are stagnant, the labor market is terrible. You've got Whitmer doing all these green energy scams and all this nonsense, and then the taxpayer ends up having to pay for all this crap. And so, the GOP is not any better. Their
No,
candidate is
absolutely.
also, they're going to pick somebody who's also an establishment, person getting money from
And
corporate donors with a corporate
Radix,
agenda.
let's not forget someone who's controlled by the Zionist entities, just like, as you like to call them, the Care Bears.
Yeah, that's true.
Yeah.
So he's somebody that is outside of basically both of these political parties in a way. He's just like a regular guy who was targeted by the government, and now he's saying, hey, we're going to get involved, and we're going to try to make sure this doesn't happen to anybody else again. And so I really encourage people, if you're in Michigan, to support his candidacy.
What's his plan? One more thing about this topic, Redx. What's his plan? Because I know this has been a big thing. Everyone in the last 2 years has been waking up to the Zionist influence in America and Talmudic control, which you like to call Care Bear influence, because I understand that's, which is a fun way to put it. What's
Yeah.
his plan to fight a lot of the Zionist influence, especially in Michigan, in its government system? What's his plan to deal with that? Like a lot of the Zionist influence going on there.
That I don't know. I don't know the specifics of his platform. I think that he'll be putting that out soon. Right now, he has to get, I think it's 15 to 30,000 signatures first before he can get on the ballot. So he will be putting out his platform very soon, and he's also going to be making a social media account for his campaign. So I encourage people to follow him there. But certainly, he's not somebody who is going to be. They can't buy him, right? Like, he's not going to be one of these people who, they start out with good intentions, and then they go in and you see how the system changes them and they become compromised. I wouldn't worry about that with Bill at all.
Hope they'll be good. They'll be good. I hope it's the same thing. Sounds really awesome, Christine. So, Redx, talking about that, I saw the brilliant video that you said the other day, and it was talking about like the Marxist Twitter meltdown over the Anastasia movie. And I wanted to, which is such a great video you did, and I wanted to also ask
It's
about
insane.
the article you also shared, which is very important. People should know, because you look at
Yes.
modern day America and how it's similar to what it is now, and it's the importance of, for example, the cosmic. So, for example, the question is, the cosmic significance of the Tsar, Nicholas II, and the Talmudic backing of the Russian Revolution. So tell us about that and that
Yeah.
video you did. Go ahead. And what do you think Americans and people should really know about the Russian Revolution and how the same people who control America had an influence into it? Who you like to call the
Yeah.
Care Bears? Go.
So that video, it's so funny because look, I love that movie as a kid. I thought Anastasia was great. And I was not one of these kids that like, like Disney princess movies, but I really liked that cartoon, and I love the soundtrack that went with it. I thought it was great, right? And as a kid, you're not thinking about any of like the actual history behind that. It's just a nice story, right? So I saw that we had like, I think it was like the 25th anniversary or 26th anniversary of the film. And one of these like Twitter accounts that is like a film, talks about films, they put out a tweet like, oh, it's the 26th anniversary of Anastasia. And Marxist communist Twitter had a collective meltdown about a children's princess movie. Okay. The things that they were saying, I just started grabbing the tweets because it was so funny in a way. It's like, oh my God, you people are deranged, right? Like, what does this say about you and your insecurities that you feel threatened by a children's princess cartoon to the point where you are seething on Twitter about this as a grown adult? I don't know any adults who would be seething about a children's cartoon, because it doesn't promote your political propaganda or whatever. It's one thing, right? If there's like something is, sexual or inappropriate about it, then okay, I could see it. An adult saying, seething about it. But they were having these meltdowns because one children's princess movie didn't cater to them and their ideology and their beliefs and all of this. So they were, accusing people of they were saying that it's like Nazi propaganda being pumped into the brains of children, and it just crazy things being said by these people, again, over a children's cartoon. And the cartoon itself, right, the movie itself doesn't even talk about Marxists or communists, really. It's not like an overtly anti-communist movie. It's just not anti-czarist propaganda. It's not maligning and smearing the royal family of Russia. And it actually blames Rasputin, right? He's the evil sorcerer, and basically the theme of this is that the people who were involved in the Russian Revolution that overthrew and murdered the Tsar and his family were under like the demonic control of a wizard. So it's like it's not even like nothing really. It's not like it actually says, hey, the Bolsheviks did this and it was wrong and they're bad people. No, it's like they're ignorant and they were just being controlled by demons. And in a sense, that is actually correct. But I just thought that was so funny, that, here are grown adults seething about a cartoon from 20-something years ago. It's wild. And not only that, but the other thing that I thought was very revealing about this was how they started gloating about the murder of the Tsar and his children, posting memes, mocking it, laughing about it, saying, yeah, and it was a good thing. And it was funny to me because these are the same Marxist communist accounts who pretend to care about the plight of the Palestinians. Oh, how dare a Palestinian child be killed? But it's perfectly fine for us to kill innocent children if they are related to the Tsar. Those innocent children dying, it's funny, and we should gloat about it. but we care about innocent Palestinian children, and we care about innocent children being killed because Palestine. Really? Because if you actually care about innocent children being killed, both of these things should be disgusting to you. And yet that's not what we see with these people. And so what that tells us is that their support of the Palestinians isn't even authentic. They don't even actually care about them, just like the narcissist, which most of these people are. They pretend. They have pseudo empathy. It's not real empathy. It is selective, and it is geared and aimed at people who they feel are inferior to them, because they view brown people or Palestinians as inferior. Therefore, they are in need of a savior. And they will say, oh, how dare something bad happen to them? But if it's a white Christian, well, then they're evil. And so we should celebrate them being killed, even if it's both innocent children. I think Nikolai was 13 years old when he was murdered. And they think that this is funny. They celebrate it. They post memes thinking that this is cool. And it's just funny to me because these people proclaim to be against capitalism, right? The Marxist, the communist on Twitter. And yet they celebrate figures like Lenin, who was financed by Western capitalists and bankers. How do they, they're, for all their pretensions about being educated, and by educated, what that really means is overly socialized and pathological. They are not that smart. They're not as smart as they think. They spend all this time talking about praxis and using their big words and nonsense to try to talk about communist theory, but they haven't even investigated the people who financed their fake Bolshevik revolution.
Yeah, that's true. That's true. Not to mention, how Nicholas II was a threat against these guys. How in the Russian Empire, he was a guy that banned usury. He kicked out a lot of these Zionist oligarchs from having any positions in the monarchical system in Russia. The work rate in Russia at that time was incredible, more better than any of the Soviet Union. Not to mention he made it into a great empire, and also how he made it into a true sovereign, empire that was, free against all this. And he obviously, not to mention, he also outlawed Freemasonry. He also banned the Talmud which is brilliant, which basically he's also Nicholas II is like Putin. Putin has also freed Russia from a lot of these Zionist oligarchs. Well, not as much as him, but he has. Same with Gaddafi. Same with the Byzantine Empire leader. And all of these empires that went against this were killed. And that's why they told it said, not to mention how he was an Orthodox Christian. He was so brilliant, such a good leader, true family. And like you mentioned, why they were targeting him, well, because he was a good man. Radix, I also was mentioning, can you also touch upon, I wanted to ask, you also touched upon not just the Talmudic influence in this revolution, but the brilliant article that you showed, the cosmic significance of the Tsar. And that too. Can you also touch upon?
Yeah. So one thing I want to add is a lot of
also these, the French Revolution.
A lot of these.
Go ahead, Radix. Go ahead.
Can you hear me? Yeah. A lot of these Marxist accounts, they are a lot of them are Care Bears. I'll just say it. Okay. Yeah. And they hate the Tsar because they have an ethnic hatred for white Russian Christians. That's part of it. But also because there were Care Bear revolutionary groups at the time who were trying to overthrow the Tsar previously. His grandfather, they tried to kill his grandfather. And I think they did assassinate his grandfather. Actually, excuse me, they did assassinate his grandfather. And so they had certain laws in place at the time, right? Like you said, that the Talmud outlawed, but also they were trying to limit the number of what are essentially foreigners from engaging in like usury in the country, because what ends up always happening is that they come in and they start taking over
Yeah.
finance, media, news publications. They start
Mhm.
doing what they do, right? Which is how they've been kicked out of so many countries in the past. It's because they were engaging in subversive behavior, and they were doing things that were harming the average person, raising prices and things of this nature. And so there were some laws put in place, and so they cry persecution. They cry pogroms. Oh, the Tsar was so evil because he inspired pogroms against, Care Bears in Russia. Well, wait a second. Care Bears assassinated his grandfather. They did that, first of all, and it wasn't, there's no evidence that the Tsar, that St. Nicholas, it ever said anything to suggest that you should go to a pogrom. These things were happening organically because people were getting sick of their behavior, the things that they were doing. That doesn't mean I condone that these things happen, these pogroms, but they don't happen for no reason. Oh, for then one day for no reason at all, we just had entire communities, trying to beat us up and exile us and kick us out, or worse.
No.
Well, why was that happening though? Was it really for no reason? No, it's because you guys come in and you create a nation within a nation. You do not assimilate. You engage in corrupt behavior. You do things like money lending and usury, and you subjugate people. And then you start monopolizing finance and press and industry and putting your fellow travelers into the same positions, and then they end up basically subjugating the people to the point where they've had enough, and then you see these violent outbursts. And I could see that we're getting to the point where that might start happening again, because they can't seem to help themselves, where they have to engage in criminal behavior essentially, and then they won't call out other Care Bears, and they won't expose their own people. They help them cover it up, and so people are very tired of it, and people have kind of woken up to the things that they do. And so yes, those are some of the complaints that they put out. I want to say that Saint Tsar Nicholas II is one of the most slandered men in history, because of the
Yes. Yeah.
Soviet propagandists who come out and they do revisionist history, they rewrite history, and then they hide information and they lie, and the only sources you have available are Soviet academic and intellectual sources. And that took a long time to change. It took a long time for some of the Soviet archives to be opened up and for more information to come out about this. And you also had a country that wasn't free, where people who had a dissenting opinion were not free to publicly state that and publish something that disagreed with the official Soviet narrative. Okay. And you have these idiot communist Marxists from the West who seemingly don't understand this. And they just take these Soviet sources at face value and regurgitate it. They have no idea. They were not there. And they ignore the Russian people who have told the truth, like Solzhenitsyn, who wrote the Gulag Archipelago, but also another book called 200 Years Together, which actually goes into the history of Care Bears in Russia, and goes into this kind of ethnic divide, I guess you could say, and these kind of clash of cultures is what ends up happening. And so the article that I shared at the end is from Death to the World, which is an Orthodox publication, and it's called The Cosmic Significance of Saint Tsar Nicholas II. And what that article does is basically outline how since the murder of the Tsar, and I want to say the ritual murder of the Tsar and his entire family and his pets and his nurse.
That's what,
It was more than just the royal family, and it was a ritual killing. Since that happened, we see that the world has gotten much darker, right? Because the Tsar represented the last Christian monarch, Orthodox Christian monarch and empire in the world, and that his role when he became the Tsar, right? It's a ceremony that is done in the Orthodox Church, where he's blessed by the church, and he takes a vow to uphold, basically to be that he is responsible for all of the Russian people to Christ, to the Lord. And that the Orthodox Empire had that understanding of, this kind of, God at the top, then the monarch who answers to God, and this involvement of the government with the church, not in a bad sense, right? But in a sense of, the church was part of society, and it was a government that aimed to be Christian and aimed to imitate Christ and to spread his word. And Saint Tsar Nicholas was a very pious man. He was even the Bolsheviks who killed him said that he was. They didn't really have anything bad to say about him as a person. Even they had to admit that he was like praying for them while they were doing what they were doing. And ultimately he kind of became it, he was essentially sacrificed in a way, and that he willingly went to this, just like Christ willingly went to his crucifixion. And so we can look at how much worse things have been since what happened in 1917, and you really do see this total godlessness descend. And there are a lot of Orthodox saints who have talked about this being one of the things that will that's the last force. The Orthodox Christian emperor was a restraining force on the Antichrist, and that now that the restraining force has been removed, and there is nothing to restrain the rise of the Antichrist. And so the Orthodox saints kind of viewed this as, this is something that's going to happen, that's going to pave the way for the reign of the Antichrist, and then eventually the second coming of Christ.
Radix, before we finish, I also wanted to ask you, in the article, it also mentioned about the modern secular idea of government based on Enlightenment ideology.
Yeah, exactly. Which is not rooted in truth. It's rooted in the idea of like rationalism and kind of biological materialism in a sense. It's not focused on Christ, and it doesn't have the same beliefs as the Orthodox Church, and that they replace these things with this idea of like humanism. This is not the truth and how things should work. Like, yes, we want to have human rights and whatnot, but when these things are divorced from Christ, they don't really mean anything, do they? Because you don't really have a foundation of the truth for your morality. What do you stand for in a secular humanist society? What is the highest ideal that you're striving for if you don't even recognize God? And there is not one, Western politician views themselves as, answerable to God. They don't even believe in God.
And also, in the article, it mentions the granddad of modern revolutions, the French Revolution, basically.
Right. Another demonic um revolution, and these revolutions always, by the way, they're never organic, right? It's not like the people just decided one day to overthrow their oppressive government. And I'm sure there were problems with the French monarchy, I don't doubt it at all. However, these revolutions are financed, they're very organized, and they're very calculated, and they were done so that there's no aristocratic class that could combat the satanic uh the satanic force that we see throughout history exerting itself, right? They had to get rid of the nobility, and there was a reason for that. And part of that is, what we're seeing coming into fruition now, this techno feudalism, right? It was to get rid of anybody that would have had the power to oppose, what they're trying to do. And it's, oh, let's make everybody equal. Okay, well, equality in nature doesn't exist, first of all. And second of all, what does that mean? We can make everybody equally poor and equally a slave. Well, that's equality, isn't it? If everybody is subject to tyranny and the whims of these oligarchs, and now you're seeing this, this system of a global surveillance system being created. Look at Palantir, for example. Palantir has contracts not just with, several United States federal agencies, the military, the Navy. They've got contracts with Israel. They have, the Lavender Project, which is, using AI to basically decide who to kill. Yeah, Project Maven for the United States military. And so you have now this future that we're going into where these companies have massive amounts of data, because there's so much information people put out on the internet about themselves. All that data is collected, and it's collected across platforms. So Palantir specifically has a very different data harvesting than other surveillance companies. What makes Palantir unique is that they're collecting data from very different repositories, I guess. It's basically, it takes data from all over all these other platforms, puts it together into one platform. And so it is very disturbing, the kinds of things they can do with that. And of course, they have been moving into predictive policing. Palantir works with American police, LAPD, NYPD, local law enforcement, even to use things like predictive policing. This is concerning. You have men like Alex Karp, who is a complete psychopath, out there running around, trying to sell this as, we have to basically create this AI surveillance system so that we can beat China, right? That's how they try to sell it to us, that, oh, we have to win the AI arms race, or China and other countries will beat us. And we're the defenders of Western democracy and of America. They're not defending America. They're literally destroying it. They're taking away our civil liberties, our civil rights. Palantir, in particular, tries to present itself as, oh, we're the one surveillance company that tries to not violate civil rights. And they say, we actually put our data sets out there so you can see how we're doing things. And so they try to present themselves as being different. They're not. And now I thought it was funny that Alex Karp had this he just did this weird speech where he, appeared to be high on stimulants. But he declared that he is neurodivergent. And because so many people were commenting, like, is this man on cocaine? He came out and announced that Palantir is creating a scholarship and a grant for neurodivergent people. And I'm just thinking, oh my God, like they're literally trying to leverage and weaponize autism, and people who are neurodivergent, they're like trying to get them on board, and co-opt them into this, uh, technocratic coming state, which is what they're doing. Palantir is in the United Kingdom. They're in the NHS. They have people's health information. They were involved in COVID vaccine rollouts and surveillance and compliance. This is disturbing, on a number of levels. It's very concerning. And so that's kind of, where we are today.
Well, Radix, that was a very good way to point it. It was a pleasure having you on my show again. Where can people find you?
I would say the best way to find me is on my Twitter. I'm not calling it X. Are we calling it X now? Because I just feel like that's
Up to
weird.
you. Pixel. People will just call it Twitter. I just call it Twitter still.
Yeah, it's always been called Twitter. I mean, we don't call them X's. Like, oh, I made an X. It's a tweet. You say I put out a tweet or whatever. Anyways, but yes, I am on X Twitter at Not Radix, NOTRADIX. You can find me there. My YouTube channel is Radix Verum, and the website for the documentary is knkfilm.com. So you can follow the documentary there. Any updates we have will go on that website. You can find, we have a page on there of how to write letters to the guys. Now that it's Christmas, we're going into Christmas, I kind of want to see if I can get people to send them like Christmas cards or a Christmas message. That would be awesome. We have a section on the website, like write to the guys, that has their mailing address and instructions for writing to the guys who are in prison. I know that's something that would definitely lift their spirits. And that's something that costs you a stamp, and it just takes 5 to 10 minutes to write a letter or to send a Christmas card. But it means a lot to these guys because they don't get any mail from anybody for the most part. It's just their families. But it's hard being in there, hard being in prison, and especially during the holidays. So I'd encourage people, if they have free time, to send the guys a letter for Christmas. Let them know that people are out here praying for them, and that people haven't forgotten them, and what happened to them. And yeah, I think that would be nice.
Well, that was a great summary. As she said, everyone, go give her support. Go follow her on Twitter, and definitely go check out her documentary that's coming out. It's going to be honest. It's going to be great when it comes out. Go give her all the support she deserves. And yeah, and it was a pleasure having you, Redix. We should definitely do another show in the future. And
Yeah,
thank you for coming
definitely.
on. It was a pleasure having you again. And I just want to say to everyone, thank you for joining the Welsh Republic podcast, episode 172 today. It was great having doing this show. Have a great day, everyone. God bless you all. Stay safe. Remember to like and subscribe to my YouTube channel. Take care. Remember to share this video, and remember to support Redx's work. She's great. She does absolutely fantastic work. Take care, everyone.
Thank
God bless you all.
you.
Stay safe, and